Shalom, I'm Rabbi Shimon Levin, founder of Israel Pack, a monthly subscription box from Israel with unique organic products made by local farmers and artisans. And today I'm inviting you to join our special Jerusalem tour. I'm really excited to welcome you here in the holy city of Jerusalem. Our super professional guide, Olga, will help me in this endeavor. We will upload this video to our website, www.israelpack.com. Olga?
Hello everyone, my name is Olga Varkon. I'm a licensed tour guide and I'm also a lucky person who calls Jerusalem home. So I will start by giving you an idea where we are located. So this hill sits to the southwest of the old city of Jerusalem. The advanced students among you, those who've been to Jerusalem already, would recognize the old city walls that are right behind me. And you might remember that if we'll continue just a little bit north along the wall, we'll find ourselves right at the foot of the Jaffa Gate, which is the main entrance to the old city. Right? You can hopefully see the tower, which is known as the Tower of David, which sits right above the gate. Okay, the slopes of Mount Zion is right behind me. To the north, you might see, right, I hope Shimon will turn a camera a little bit and you will see the Montefiore windmill, the famous King David Hotel. So this site is located, we would say, in the downtown of Jerusalem, a very central location. And it always fascinates me how easily you can travel back in time here in Jerusalem. And you don't even need to be inside the old city for this, right? I will take you some almost 3,000 years back in history. And we're not in the old city, right? As we've said. So take it as a pro tip, or a tip from the local resident. When you're coming to Jerusalem, never restrict yourself to the old city. Explore Jerusalem. There are fascinating stories around almost any corner, right? The city lived too many lives, I would say, and the history and the archaeology of Jerusalem is very, very rich. Okay, so now as you got an understanding where we're located, more or less, I would like to relate just a little bit to the name of the site we'll be exploring today. You might remember from the description of this event that we're talking about Ketef Hinnom. How is your Hebrew, guys? Repeat after me. Ketef Hinnom. Okay, so first of all, Hinnom, right, relates to the Hinnom Valley. Okay, this hill is located right next to the famous, or should I say infamous, Hinnom Valley, because it is strongly associated with the idolatry worship, which included child sacrifice to the Canaanite idol named Molech. Okay, so this bloodthirsty cult, right, was performed here, and when Judahite kingdom was at the moral of the Judahite kingdom was at its lowest, we know of Jewish people, following the ways of the Canaanites and doing the same thing. Okay, you can open Jeremiah or any of the prophets, almost any of the prophets, especially as we're looking towards the end and the times towards the end of the monarchy, and you will hear of kings, Judahite kings, that sacrificed their children to Molech, which was done by the means of fire. Now, with the passing of time, the Hinnom Valley, which lies right at the foot of this hill, the Hinnom Valley became city's dump, where corpses of dead animals and criminals and all kind of filth were taken to and destructed there by the means of fire. Right? You should imagine a fire that was kept constantly burning there, and this is how this image of this place was created. Now, why I'm expanding so much on this Hinnom Valley, because I suppose some of you might be familiar with this name, if not in Hebrew, maybe in its English version, I should say, right? You might remember the name Gehenna, okay, which usually, or uniformly rendered hell, as you read in New Testament, right? If you look up Mark or Matthew or James speaking about the fire of hell, this is what they're talking about, okay? They're talking about this place. Now, isn't that amazing how we can really speak about the geography of faith, right? How we can really get a better understanding of how all these images and ideas were evolving and how deeply they all are rooted in the landscape of Jerusalem. Okay, so this is what I wanted to kind of remind you about the Valley of Hinnom. Okay, and again, it sits right at the foot of this hill. And now I want to give you the idea, right, of the topographical location or the topography of this area. So if we're talking about the Hinnom Valley, right, the riverbed sitting all the way down there, okay, you should imagine the hill, right, starting at the riverbed and climbing up gradually, okay? And we are sitting at the highest point of this hill, the summit of the hill, which in Hebrew is called shoulder, Ketef. Okay, so Ketef Hinnom, the name reflects both the location, which is next to the Valley of Hinnom, and the topography, this place being the highest point, or the shoulder of this hill. And now I guess you are asking yourselves, so what brought us here? Or what brought archaeologists here, right? You're saying, come on, the old city is there. The historical heart of Jerusalem is there. So why are you digging here? Why archaeological digs here in this area? Go dig there, right? Imagine the treasures, right, of the city. So the truth must be said that the old city, the city of David, is definitely the most intensively excavated area in the land of Israel. We're digging there for 150 years, not only us, right, Israeli archaeologists, but also archaeologists and archaeological teams that are coming from abroad, given the fact that Jerusalem is so dear and so significant for so many people around the world. But I guess you will agree that sometimes, in order to get a better understanding of the city, in order to get a fuller picture, if you like, you need to leave the city behind. You kind of need to leave the walls, to go outside. And that's exactly what we're doing here, okay? We're leaving the city, we're outside of the city walls, and we're looking for the remnants of human activity that could be found in this place. So what kind of human activity could be found outside but close enough to the city? So the first thing are agriculture, right? I need to remind you that in ancient times, the economy of the city was based on agriculture, okay? Now, we're very much interested how people were growing their food in this terrible climate of ours. I must tell you, it's boiling hot in Jerusalem right now. Okay, I guess you were not checking the forecast since you're doing a virtual tour. Okay, but it's around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, to give you an idea. And it's been here 5 days like this. So if at some point you don't see me on your screen, it might well mean that I melted into a puddle. This is how hot it is right now in Jerusalem. Okay, so back to archaeology. So we will be looking for agriculture outside of the city walls. We would be looking for fortresses, right, that would be controlling the roads, the approaches to the city. And mentioning the roads, okay, I must tell you that this hill was actually part, right, of the main road that was leading from the southern areas through Jerusalem, towards Jerusalem and further north, meaning anybody who was coming from Beersheba or Hebron or Bethlehem, okay, all people who would love to reach Jerusalem, they would certainly pass through this area. Okay, now the Bible actually mentions this road. The book of Judges tells us the story of a certain man from the tribe of Levi who was traveling from Bethlehem with his concubine and his servant. And at the sunset, they found themselves on the crossroads. Now, they were really close to Jerusalem. Back then, Jebus, remember, Jebusites were controlling Jerusalem couple of hundreds of years, okay, and they needed to decide whether to stay overnight in Jebus or rather continue to some Israelite settlement. Spoiler, was a bad decision there. Okay, it's in Judges 19. Don't look it up unless you want to ruin your day. Okay, it's a nasty story, and I'm only mentioning it here because I want you to get an understanding of what a strategic location we are at. Okay, so the road from the southern areas to Jerusalem, agriculture, and another thing that we would be expecting to find here would be army encampments. You know that Jerusalem knew many sieges, dramatic sieges in its history, and remnants of those camps, okay, from Roman times, from Assyrian times, Babylonian times, okay, they were found in these areas and around Jerusalem in general. So we've mentioned several examples of extramural activities, but we haven't mentioned everything. And now we're getting to the really important one, right? The one that brought us here. Okay, try to think, as I'm taking a gulp of water. Okay, try to think what else could be found close enough to the city, but yet outside of it.
Okay, we are about 100 people already.
Oh, I'm very much excited.
First of all, I want to thank our subscribers.
We do thank you all, and we're very much excited that you're joining live broadcast. And I hope we all hope, right, very much that you will be enjoying this virtual tour. Unfortunately, you know, it's not that easy for a tour guide not to have the people in front of me, okay? But I guess there were right answers, right? Feel free to write comments. Tell us where you're from. Say hello. We'll be happy to see all your remarks. Feel free to ask questions as well. We'll try to answer those, I guess, in the end of this broadcast. So I'm getting back, right? So what's all the human, or kinds of human activities that could be found outside of the city walls? So the most important one, or probably the most important one for us at least, as we're talking about this side, is burial grounds or ancient cemeteries. Now, it's getting spooky, I know, but it might sound strange to you, but ancient cemeteries, they're telling the story of the living and not the story of the dead. So please follow me to the actual archaeological site, which is an ancient burial caves. Okay, you can see a nice cozy garden here. The gate is open. It's pretty surprising, I would say, that an important archaeological site like this one is open freely to public, right? No admission fee. Come, learn, explore the site, get inspired. Okay, and that's what we love about Israel, which is a very welcoming country, and that's what we love about Jerusalem, which is a very welcoming city. Okay, now can you see this ramp?
Yes.
Okay, you won't. Again, this is not something to be taken for granted when we're talking about archaeological sites. Not all of them are accessible, okay, but many of them are. So you won't find any steps here. The site is easily reached. Okay, so we're talking about 7 burial caves that were found here. The dig was conducted in several seasons from 1979 to 1989. You're saying old news, but you should know that there are no old news in archaeology, or I should say the older the better. Okay, and these burial caves, again, they're telling the story of the living. How come? We need to remember that those were living people who created the cemetery. And burial customs and burial practices, they reflect the world of the living, their beliefs, their philosophical ideas, right? There would be doing it in a way that is important and meaningful for them, right, for the living. And then the material culture, and we'll expand on this, the material culture would also add, right, to this mosaic of the everyday life of the biblical times here in Jerusalem. Okay, so we'll be talking about burial caves. We'll walk down the path so to reach the caves themselves. Okay, we're talking about limestone. Okay, so please follow me. These are late afternoon hours in Jerusalem, and as we said, the city sits in the mountains, right? It's all limestone, and you can see this beautiful yellowish golden color that the Jerusalem stones gets during the sunset. Okay, so if you heard Jerusalem called the city of gold, so it's not so much because of the gold mines that we have here, we don't have any, okay, but because of this very special color that Jerusalem stone acquires at the sunset hours. Okay, so as we're walking along these caves here, and I know you're wondering which are the caves exactly, right? Where are the caves? Okay, because what you see basically, you know, exposed rock. Okay, you can easily see that people were cutting into this rock, but you don't see the caves so much. Okay, so apparently, you know, you should get a basic but very important understanding about Jerusalem. One of the basic things is that through all of its history, Jerusalem was and still is a living place. We call it sequence of habitation, meaning people never left Jerusalem. Okay, it's, you know, it's kind of a thing that you want to meditate about, right? And think about what keeps the city going. We would always say the spirit of the city much more than the physical essence of it. Okay, but the fact is the fact. There's 5,000 years of history, human presence, human activity at all the time periods. And human activity, we love to think it as being, you know, people are creating, people are building, but people are also ruining things. Okay, so these caves, again, dated back to the first temple times, biblical times. We're talking about 700s BCE. Towards the end of this time period, okay, they were ruined by the later quarrying activity. Okay, so the ceiling, this is what we're missing, right? You need to imagine the ceiling, and we're also missing the doors, the entries to the caves. Okay, but I'll show you the picture, and there are also remnants of the rocky ceiling, which I will show you in a minute. Okay, but first, have a look at my picture. I hope very much that you're able to see. Okay, so you can see a relatively narrow entryway. Okay, and what is next to it? Can you see this stone? Okay, so apparently those caves that were filled with stones, and I'm more than sure that you're starting to get flashbacks, right? And you're remembering the stories of the Jesus burial, right? Of the burial tomb, family burial tomb of Joseph from Arimathea, right? That was given to Jesus' burial, and you remember the rolling stone that sealed, was supposed to seal the tomb. Okay, so that's the picture that you should have in mind when we're talking about these caves here. So again, ceiling that was ruined by the quarrying activity. By the way, can you see this beautiful church? Okay, the apse of the church sits right above this side. Okay, so this is Scottish Presbyterian Church of St. Andrew. St. Andrew being the patron of Scotland. Okay, so this very church that was built here by the British in 1927, the building blocks were quarried right next to the construction site, meaning right here. Okay, so you would say, we need to use our imagination, which would always be true when we're talking about biblical sites. We need to use a lot of imagination in order to reconstruct structures, right, or living areas, or whichever, when we're talking about ancient times. So use your imagination, but do agree with me that there is also an advantage to the fact that the ceiling was ruined. How come? You know, I would need to bend down and kind of crawl inside, so to enter the cave, and here it is without the ceiling. It's all exposed, right, and I can easily go down. Okay, so have a look. This is the street level. Okay, you can see the bedrock. This is the level of the bedrock. Okay, so you can see a step that leads me inside the cave. Okay, and the fact, right, that the cave is hewn into the rock, right, this enabled actually the burial team to stand straight, right, and was comfortable enough to be for them to be inside and to take care of the bodies. Okay, you can see here to the left and to the right high-rise stone benches. I will explain about this later on. Okay, but you can see more or less the height, right, which again enables me to take care of the corpses and to do whichever was necessary to be done. Okay, now here, this is the reason actually why I'm bringing you inside this cave. You can see remnants of the ceiling. I hope very much that you can see the corner right here, okay, of this central hall or the central chamber of this burial cave. Okay, so this is how tall the ceiling used to be. Okay, so again, we're imagining this area as being covered area with a rocky ceiling right above me. This is the entrance. We should imagine a narrow door, next to it a stone that used to seal the cave. Okay, and now I'm taking you to the very special cave, which will actually be the focus of our tour. Please come. Okay, I hope Shimon will give you a view, right, a look on St. Andrew's Church. Again, notice the golden color of Jerusalem stone. Okay, and here is the cave number 24. Yes, 24 out of 7 caves that were excavated here. So the numbers, you know, archaeologists are giving the numbers according to the amount of sites, actual sites that the dig was conducted at. Okay, it has nothing to do with the actual amount of caves that was dug here. Okay, so we're next to the cave number 24, and I have here a plan of this cave, and I want to give you a quick insight of what a cave looked like, because all the caves, and we have hundreds of caves dated back to the First Temple times now in and around Jerusalem, and we can tell you that all of them are following more or less the same plan. Okay, so there was a standard when cutting a road, when cutting a burial cave, right? You were following a certain plan. Okay, but before I will explain you the plan itself, forget for a moment that we're talking.
People ask right a question. We wrote all the questions, and we should want to thank them. And at the end of the
okay, Shimon's telling me that you're asking beautiful questions. So don't worry. You know, this forum is not the best forum to answer the questions as we're getting them. But don't worry, I will answer all your questions. In the end, I will get them from Shimon, and I will do my best to give you best answers possible. Okay, so again, forget that I told you that this is a burial cave. Have a look on this plan. What it reminds you of. What it looks like. Like a plan of, I'm more than sure that there are people who are right now writing there in the comments. This looks very much like a plan of a living house. Da 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 da. Isn't that a fascinating insight? These burial caves from the first temple times, they look very much, or they actually are copies of the living houses of those days. Now, as you can guess, there are no living houses from the first temple times that are still standing. Okay? If we're lucky, we might uncover, the foundations of those houses, and we'll try to reconstruct and we'll try to understand as much as possible all the restrictions of how the house looked like. So you see, the research of the burial cave actually gives us an insight and a better understanding of what a house looked like in those days. So have a look. There is a forecourt. Okay, so we kind of right now located in this forecourt. Then there would be the entrance. Remember, I showed you the picture of the door, right? The entryway to the cave, and we said it was narrow one. By the way, why it was such a narrow entry? For the practical reasons, right? You need to seal it with a stone. So if the entryway would be, a tall one, okay, so you can't really seal it efficiently with a stone, okay, and you don't want animals to go inside and desecrate the body. You don't want tomb robbers to go inside. I will explain you why tomb robbers were interested actually in getting in. Okay, but this is the entrance. Okay, the step. Remember me walking down the steps, so to enter the central room. Now, in terms of living house, how would you call this room? The living room. Exactly. The living room. Now, from this living room, there are several entries bringing us to smaller chambers, which are, again, in the terms of a living house, those are bedrooms. Bedrooms in the burial cave? Yes, very much so. These are bedrooms. Even more so, when we're entering those bedrooms, right, those smaller burial chambers, we'll find out, right, that on all three sides, right, on three sides of those burial chambers, there would be high-rised benches, stone benches, like stone shelves, like the ones we saw previously, okay, which are called in Hebrew written sources mitot, or beds, just like this. Those are beds because this is a bedroom. Okay, now each bed will typically have two headrests. Can you see this cycled headrest with an opening for a neck? Okay, and it was curved in a raised stone pillow. I don't have any other word to describe it. Okay, so keep all these details in mind. Okay, try to keep this picture in your memory, because in a moment I will take you to this burial cave, and we will see all these things we're talking right now about. Okay, so we have central room, smaller chambers, we call them bedrooms. We have beds, we have headrests, we have stone pillows, and we should really ask ourselves why it looks so much like a bedroom. So in ancient times, people, when they were thinking about death and trying to understand, right, trying to imagine, and struggling with this as well, I guess, right, was what was happening with the person after the death. They were usually imagining death as being kind of as a sleeping person is not really with us, is not fully aware what is happening around him, but continues to live the same they thought about the dead. They believed that after the death, the certain person, right, will continue his living in a special world, right, in the underground world of the dead. And that explains to you why funerary offerings or burial offerings, or the richness of the material culture that comes out of the burial caves. The family, right, would provide those burial gifts those burial offerings, seeing them as things needed by the deceased relative. Those would be usually things that were associated with this person. So we're finding a lot of jewelry. We'll find personal stamps, weapons, and also a lot of pottery. Now don't think about cooking pots or plates. Apparently there's no need for cooking pots and plates for the dead, but we're finding a lot of decanters, we're finding oil lamps, perfume bottles, okay, things like that. And pottery is extremely important when we're talking archaeology, because it basically helps us to date the artifacts, right, and the site in general. Okay, so how it was done. So it was done, right, burial in ancient times, if we're talking about biblical times, was done in 2 stages. The first stage, the corpse would be laid on one of these stone benches. This is an open burial, right? The corpse won't be covered with dirt or anything like that. And then the cave would be sealed with a stone. For how long? For a year. What happens with the flesh, with the body in 1 year? It decomposes. The body disintegrates. Now, if you will think about it, all the sins are the sins of flesh. So the moment the flesh disappears, right, it was believed that the person is actually been cleansed of his sins. And then, this is when the second stage, the actual burial would happen. After a year, the family would go back to the tomb, would open it, would collect the bones, okay, and would put them into a stone-cut, rock-cut pit that would be sitting under one of the stone benches in the smaller burial chambers. Okay, so that's what we call a repository. In a moment, we'll show you the repository that is here preserved in this burial cave. But basically, this is the shelf. This is a cross section. That's what you're seeing. Okay, this is the burial shelf. You can see the headrests. Okay, and this is the repository. So all the bones, the material things, right? All the burial offerings. Okay, all the stuff would be actually put inside the repository. Now, why I'm stressing this so much? Because I want you now to recall any life story, right? Or, life story of any biblical figure. I'm talking about key figures like kings. Okay, there is a certain formula with which the life story ends, right? King David dies, and what is in the end? And King David slept with his fathers, right? Or he was laid down with his fathers, or he was gathered upon his people, right? And check the story of Abraham if you like, or any other key biblical figure, and you will see the same. So Bible actually reflects on the practice, right? Burial practices, right? That were kind of normal back then, right? That were practiced back then. Because we're talking about a family burial cave, which means that all the generations of the same family, they all would be buried and laying in this very cave, right? In this specific cave. By the way, have a look on this plan. I can tell you that this family used to have 1, 2, 3, 4 sons. How do I know? How do you know those were sons and not daughters? Well, apparently, women never die. I'm kidding. Couldn't resist. Okay, so apparently daughters of the family would be buried in the burial tombs of their husband's family. Okay, and right, the burial tomb, right, only the sons and their families would be buried in the burial tomb of the specific family. Okay, so the bones gathered, everything would be put into repository, so you can imagine the richness of the material finds that can come out of those burial caves, right? Imagine generation after generation being buried in the same place with all the material objects. Okay, but you can guess. Well, it sounds too good to be true, right? Remember what was said about Jerusalem, the sequence of habitation. Okay, so when archaeologists are getting to those burial tombs from the first temple times, they usually are finding them plundered. Okay, people were looting burial tombs. Everybody knew that there were good things you should look for in those burial tombs. By the way, I should mention that when we're talking about rock-cut burial tombs, we're talking about a very expensive thing. Okay, only well-off Jerusalemite families or Israeli Judite families were able to afford, right, to themselves such a decent burial, which means that the material objects, right, would be quite an expensive ones, right? We're talking about luxury objects. So most of the caves that were found loaded already, and that's what makes this specific cave such a special story. So please follow me. We'll now be entering the cave. Again, this is the forecourt. Okay, you can see the steps. I'm walking inside. Okay, now I'm inside the cave. I'm inside the central room. Okay, so you can see stone benches to my right, and to my left, and to my right. And I actually have a picture that might help you to get a better understanding of how it looked like. Can you see the skeleton? Okay, so this is a reconstruction of this very cave. Okay, that was done by Israel Museum. You can find it there. Okay, you can see how the skeleton was laying right on one of those stone shelves. You can see material objects. Okay, there's burial offerings laying on the opposite shelf, and now you have all this pottery on the floor. Now, this is not an accurate reconstruction, right? All the pottery, you're advanced students. I know I can count on you. Okay, you remember that all the pottery and all the material objects should actually be sitting inside the repository. I hope you can see, right, this opening under the stone shelf right opposite me. Okay, so this is the repository. This is where all this pottery should be sitting. But then in the museum, you won't be able to see if it will be sitting inside this pit. Okay, and that's why they decided, right, to reconstruct it in this way. Okay, so I want you to have a closer look on the shelf itself because it has a unique arrangement of the headrests. I would ask Shimon to come closer, if you will. Okay, so we're talking about quite a wide stone shelf, the bed, right? And you can see the headrests. Okay, this is the opening for the neck. Normally I have a volunteer that would lay down to show how it was done. Okay, I was trying. You know what? See what's going on here right now. Everything you needed to know about customer service of Israel Pack. Okay, Shimon is laying down. I will try to find a better angle. Hope you can see it. Okay, it seems that Shimon is feeling comfortable enough. Yeah, he even says hello. Come on, guys. Who else would lay down, in a burial cave for you? This is hilarious. Thank you, Shimon, so much. Well done. Great job. Okay, but I want you to see, this is actually the right angle, right? You can see that the stone shelf has 6 headrests in a row. Now, the normal arrangement would be, I'm taking you closer. Yeah, you can get it back. Okay. Sorry for this. Okay, anyways, this is a typical stone shelf, right? Again, this is where the corpse was laid. Okay, so this is the typical arrangement. Relatively narrow stone shelf, the headrest, okay, and normally we have two on the opposite sides, okay, so that you can decide which is the best way that you would put the corpse on it, okay. Now here we have six in a row. We don't know to explain it, okay. This is a unique arrangement. We don't have any other tomb with the same amount, or you know, this is just the largest amount of the headrest that we have here. We don't know to explain why. Whether it was the times of war, siege on Jerusalem, right? When this cave was cut out here, maybe it was a plague. You know, plagues was a common thing in ancient world. Talking about pandemic right now. So we don't know to explain it, but the fact is that, right, we have 6 headrests here in a row. Okay, but what makes this cave really special is the fact that the repository, which is situated right here, okay, and I hope Shimon will be able to give you a look inside it later on. Okay, so the repository was found untouched. Untouched. I mean, archaeologists were the first to reach it. Okay, with all of its content. Okay, now, how it happened? There is a story. Actually, they were not the archaeologists who discovered the fact that the repository was full of its original content. You know that archaeological digs here in Israel, they usually conducted with the help of many volunteers. People are coming from abroad, people are coming from all over the world to join the digs because, again, it's Jerusalem, right? And I guess there are people among you who are saying right now, sounds like fun, right? Sounds like a great experience to be digging biblical Jerusalem. Okay, but it's not only foreigners who are coming. Israelites are also coming. And sometimes schools are actually bringing their students for an archaeological dig in Jerusalem. Now, I must tell you the truth. Usually it's the teacher who is overexcited about taking his students, especially as we're talking about, you know, high junior students, to the dig. All right, teenagers, well, they might be excited as long as they think of an archaeological dig being a treasure hunt, right? But the truth is that archaeological dig is a hard work, quite a dirty work, okay? And those school kids that were brought to this specific dig, right? Again, we're talking about late 70s. Very soon, okay, they found themselves frustrated. Okay, because imagine this, and right now I'm talking about a certain 13-year-old, okay, that was put inside this repository, and we're talking about relatively small area. It's rock cut, we feel the humidity inside, and you know, he was alone, and he was bored, and he had a heavy archaeological hammer with him. Now, do we all agree that a teenager boy and the hammer is not a good combination? I can tell you more. I have 3 boys myself. Okay, it's not a good combination. So at some point, when he was really bored, he started banging on the rocky surface inside the repository. And suddenly, the floor cracked, because this wasn't the floor. So what happened is that part of the ceiling of this repository, the rocky ceiling of the repository itself, collapsed. You know, it might be during the earthquake, for some other reason, right? Some natural agents were here and to blame for, right, for this collapse. One way or another, the ceiling collapsed and covered the repository and the content of the repository almost completely. So anyone who looked inside saw the rocky surface. It looked like an empty room, okay, an empty pit. And that's what archaeologists thought okay, that is empty. It was looted long before them. And that's why they felt, comfortable enough to pull the school kids to clean it up before the photo shot. Okay, before it would be measured and pictures would be taken, right, for the final reports. Now, do you know what's the first thing any volunteer is learning, right, when he's joining an archaeological dig? The first thing you learn is that if you seeing something that looks like an artifact to you, do not touch it. Do not touch it. Leave it in situ, meaning in its original location. Bring the archaeologist, bring the professional, right, so that he would measure and draw it and take pictures for all the possible angles, and he would actually excavate, right? He would take it out of the dirt because every small detail matters, right? Remember, archaeology is all about layers, right? So this is how dating is done, okay? So this original location of every artifact is of, central importance. Now, the moment the floor cracked and the kid saw the pottery there, right, complete pottery vessels, can you guess what he did? You're right. He took hands full of complete pottery vessels and brought them like this to the archaeologist, Professor Gabi Barkai, who was in charge of this dig. And now today, when Gabi is recalling those events and telling the story, he always saying the same thing. I almost got a heart attack. Just imagine a kid standing with his hands full of complete pottery vessels from the first temple times. I need to remind you, right, when we're talking about archaeology of the first temple times, we're not talking about complete vessels, right? We're talking about shreds, right? We all have this picture in mind of an archaeologist trying to put, right, all the pieces together, right? Kind of a puzzle, archaeological puzzle of the sorts. So it's quite a rare find, right? A complete pottery vessel. Now I'm already, to make the long story short, right? 1,000 objects came out from this single repository. 1,000 objects. This is wow. I'm sorry I can't hear your wow, guys. I hope you're writing those wows in the comments, and we'll get them later on. Okay? 1,000 objects, 260 something complete pottery vessels. We're talking about dozens of iron finds, right? Like knives, needles, arrowheads, right? We're talking about iron arrowheads and several bronze. Thank you. I counted on this wow. I'm excited myself. This is not the first time that I'm telling the story, and each time I'm excited as if it is the first time. Now, there were several bronze arrowheads that were found in this repository. The arrowheads of Scytho-Iranian type. Okay, so this is the type that was introduced here with the Babylonian army, right? When Babylonians are coming here and they're putting a siege of Jerusalem, this is the weapon they bring with them. Now, the tips of several of those arrowheads were bent. So it might very well be that those arrowheads were the reason, right, the certain person found himself in this burial cave, right, on this burial shelf. Okay. I must tell you that it's really exciting, because it's almost like you're touching on a human story behind the artifacts. It might well be that this person was defending Jerusalem during the Babylonian siege, right? He fell victim, and right of this fighting, of this war that would eventually bring the destruction of Jerusalem in 600 BCE. So these are the iron finds. We found glass objects. Now I need to explain to you what a rare and extremely important find it is, because we're talking 700s, say late 700s BCE, before the Common Era, or early 600s BCE. these are the times before glass blowing techniques were invented. This is what turned glass into a common material found everywhere, right? But we're talking 700 BC or 600 BCE. This was definitely a luxury object. And again, I'm reminding you that burial caves, right, were done for wealthy families. Okay, so glass finds, bone handles normally found next to bronze cooking pots. We didn't find the pots. We suspect that we're taking out the members of the same family, right, later generation, for remelting, since bronze was an expensive material. But we do found the handles themselves. Ivory. Go back to the book of Amos, and he will tell you about wealthy families there in Samaria, right, in the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, okay, that were having this beautiful furniture with ivory inlays, right, which was a decorative element, right, in the wooden furniture. So we're finding those in this repository. Tons of beads that came in all kinds of materials and forms: gold, silver, precious stones, semi-precious stones, rare stones. We're talking about the most representative collection of jewelry from the First Temple times. You should open your Bible in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 3. Are you opening? Oh, chapter 3, Isaiah? What do you mean you don't have your Bible next to you? Okay, another pro tip. When walking around Jerusalem, you should always have your Bible with you. Okay, first of all, you'll see the scripture come to life, and that's how you'll get the much better understanding of the scripture. So if we'll go back to this certain verse, right? I must tell you, I admire Isaiah the prophet. He gives a full list of jewelry, right, that the daughters of Zion used to adorn themselves with. Okay, do you know many men that would be able to give a list of different kinds of jewelry? Okay, I don't know too many. Okay, as Isaiah is among the few. Okay, so this was actually the first representative collection of the jewelry from the first temple times. And the jewelry brings me actually to the most important find, which was the reason we've chosen this place for this virtual tour. So among the many beads they came out in this dig, they found a tiny silver scroll. Imagine like a really thin silver plaque that was rolled. Okay, this thing is like 1 inch in length. Okay, it looks like a cigarette butt. Okay, a tiny thing was rolled. You can see the hole in the middle, so it looked very much like a bead. Okay, again, it was found with all the jewelry. Okay, so one silver scroll like this was found during the dig, and another one, a smaller one, was found as the dirt from the repository. The repository was carefully sifted through. Okay, so we actually have 2 tiny silver scrolls. Now, imagine an archaeologist holding a tiny silver scroll on the palm of his hand. Now, Professor Gabi Barkai immediately suspected that there should be an inscription inside. The metal analyzers showed that this scroll was made of 99% silver. That's what we call pure silver. In the Bible, it is mentioned several times, right? It's pure silver. There was only 1% of copper added to the material. Now, what do we know about silver? Do we all agree that it's quite pliable material, which also means that it's quite fragile. Okay, so these two scrolls were sent to several archaeological laboratories in Europe. Was sent to Berlin and was sent to London, okay, to see if they would be able to open, to unroll the scrolls, to see.
Isaiah 3:18-23.
Advanced students, I told you. Okay, now. Excuse me?
En Marabito.
Oh, Anne is writing us the exact location of the exact verses. Okay, so in Isaiah 3, verse 22 and further on. Okay, but again, they sent this silver scrolls to those laboratories, and the answer they got was that you shouldn't even try to open this. Right, the thing is dated to 700s BCE. It's silver. You can see on this drawing, right, that it was heavily corroded. Right, it was erosion was eating the thing. Right, for thousands of years it was sitting underground. Right, in this humid place. Okay, and the object was damaged. Okay, so it was a huge risk that while trying to unroll it, you will basically ruin the thing. Again, to make the long story short, it took them some 3 years to find the right technique to open those silver scrolls, and this was done here in Jerusalem in the laboratories of Israel Museum. And I'm saying to find the right technique, this is actually to invent a new technique, so to unroll this silver scrolls. Okay, so this is the larger one. You can get an idea, right, that we're talking about a tiny thing. Okay, the full length of the larger one is 3.5 inches only. That's a tiny thing. Okay, and 1 inch and is 1 inch wide. A smaller scroll is 1.5 inch long when unrolled. Okay, and 1/2 inch wide. Now, the moment they started to unroll the scrolls, the writing, right, the letters of ancient Hebrew script started to appear. Can you imagine the excitement? Now, Gabi was summoned immediately to those laboratories, and he says that the first word he was able to decipher was the tetragrammaton. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is what we call the name of God, which we normally are not pronouncing, right? We would normally say the Lord, right? It has 4 letters, okay? And now in English versions of the Bible, right, sometimes they would write Jehovah, right? So this is what we call tetragrammaton, the name of God. So we can't underestimate the importance of this find, right? This is actually the first time the name of God was found in the archaeological dig in Jerusalem, okay? It's dated to the 700s BCE. These are the times when the Solomonic temple was still standing on the Temple Mount, okay? Now, again, it was like a bombshell, right? Because imagine the implications for the Bible study, right? The implications for the historical study of ancient Israel, the study of the religion of ancient Israel, the beliefs, right? But as they continued to unroll the scrolls, right? They paid attention that the name of God is reappearing, right? The Hebrew verses are actually building themselves one on the previous, the next one on the previous one. Okay, it goes like 3 words and then 5 words in the next verse and then 7 words in the third verse. Okay, and as they started to decipher, and I must tell you, this wasn't an easy thing, right? We're talking about micro writing, right? The letters were delicately scratched on the surface. They don't go all the way through the silver. Okay, so this was quite a difficult job to decipher these spatial photographic and computer imaging techniques in order to be able to do so. But little by little, the words started to appear, and the amazing thing was that they didn't know some sophisticated computer program to understand what is this text, right? What are these verses? Because basically, I can stop almost anybody on the street right now, any bypasser, okay, read these verses out loud, and the person would know what I'm talking about, right? He would even be able to continue, right, to complete the verses I will be reciting. We'll see right now if this will work with you guys, because we're talking about one of the most familiar verses of the Hebrew Bible, you know, that have almost ecumenical significance, right? Used both in Judaism and Christianity, used by rabbis, priests, and pastors many times, right? People talking to their congregation would end the worship, the service, right, with these very words to offer the comfort or as a source of inspiration. So I will first recite those verses in Hebrew. We're in Jerusalem after all, okay? This is the language of the Bible. So it goes like this. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. So those of you who quickly ran and brought the Bible and now you have it in your hand, please go with me to Numbers 6. And I will start reading from the verse 22, right, to give you the context of the verses I recited in Hebrew just now. So Numbers 6, verse 22 goes like this. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons. Thus shall you bless the people of Israel. Say to them, the Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. The Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace." Can you imagine the excitement? These people sitting there in the laboratory, reading the name of God written on this tiny silver scroll, and as it goes on, right, finding that we actually are talking about the priestly blessing. Now, I will take you. Oh, you want to try and show the repository? Okay, so follow Shimon right now. Let's go ahead.
It's not light mistake.
So again, it's late afternoon hours in Jerusalem. It's not too much light, natural light here, but I hope you will get an idea what we're talking about. So this is a tiny rock-cut room that sits under this stone shelf. Okay, so I'm taking you to this picture that we have here that shows you, right, the smaller of these two silver scrolls unrolled, right? You can see the letters of ancient Hebrew script. Now, I don't know if you noticed the necklace that I'm wearing. Usually I can count on ladies. So I'm wearing a replica of this very silver scroll. Okay, Shimon is trying to show you close up. Okay, so you can get an idea how fond I am of this specific artifact. And you know, again, we're going to expand on the significance of this find. I mean, academic research, again, Bible study or historical religious study of the ancient Israel. But I'm choosing today to talk about the human story which is behind this find. So remember Professor Gabi Barkai? So he was born in Hungary in the dark years of Nazi occupation during the World War II. He was born in the Jewish ghetto of Budapest. And he recalls, when he tells this story, right, he says that as a kid, right, the first Hebrew words that I would learn to understand, right, to recognize, were the words of the priestly blessing. Because these are the words that every Jewish father is blessing his kids with every Friday night, right? As a Jewish family is welcoming Sabbath, the holiday. Okay, this is the way I'm blessing my kids every Friday night. And that's why, remember I told you I can almost almost anybody on the street, right? And ask what I'm reciting and people would know what I'm talking about. Because again, this prayer is so deeply rooted in Jewish history and let's say Jewish family. And now imagine this Hungarian kid, right, remembered his photo and his our years there in the ghetto of Budapest. He grew up, the state of Israel was proclaimed, he immigrated to Israel, he studied archaeology here in Jerusalem, he became one of the most prominent archaeologists of modern day Israel, and here it is, he is holding a silver scroll in his hand, which has priestly blessing on it. It was a find of a lifetime for him. Definitely, there's no question about it. But can you imagine the excitement, right? It's almost like completing a cycle, closing of the cycle, right? For Gabi Barkai, and for all of us, right? Because that's what we mean by saying that we feel like part of this long chain of generations, right? We're touching the past, we're the present, we're looking into the future, right? But in the end, what inspires us, the beautiful words of the Bible. And that's why we choose to brought you here on this virtual tour in this crazy times of ours. We want to remind you that Jerusalem was and still is the source of the blessing. So we're sending the blessing to you from Jerusalem, from this amazing archaeological site. We're sending you the blessing of good health. We're sending you the blessing of hope. We're sending you the blessing of peace. May God bless you and protect you. With these beautiful words, we'd like to finish, officially at least, the virtual tour. Okay, I guess we're ready. Yeah, sure.
You will answer the questions.
Okay, so we'll take a couple of questions again. I don't believe we'll be able to answer everything right now, but again, don't worry. I will get your questions and I will definitely relate to all of them. Feel free to contact me via Facebook, email. I'll put my contacts there on the Facebook page of Israel Pack. I hope very much you enjoyed it. Tell us if you want more, if you're interested, if this is something that you will be interested in, and put Jerusalem on your list. Right, the moment traveling restrictions would be lifted, right? Put Jerusalem on your list.
So we chose a few questions.
Okay, a couple of questions that I'm getting here. Why would the British have been allowed to have quarried and collapsed the burial caves? I'm so upset that they did that. Okay, I must tell you that, well, it would sound strange, but archaeology is relatively new science, right? We're talking about mid-19th century, right? That people started to get an understanding, right? That if you dig deep underground, right, you might find remnants of previous time periods, and quite fascinating ones. But again, this is something that is evolving, right? This understanding takes time, right, for this science to kind of develop. Okay, so we're outside of the city. Back then, imagine, it was like nothing outside the wall, almost nothing, right? The new city of Jerusalem, all these neighborhoods that are sitting outside of the city walls, this is quite a relatively new development, right? We're talking about late 19th century that this neighborhood started to be being built here. Okay, no one cared. Won't believe, but no one cared. When today we know that we're talking about burial tombs from the first temple period, but back then people had no idea at all. Okay, and again, those were, common people, common workers, right? They were quarrying the stone here. Okay, so again, it's just lack of understanding the realities of archaeology. I hope this answers your question.
One more question.
What was the other one? Okay. A large family, possibly. So I guess this question relates to the fact that we have some 6 headrests on this shelf. Okay, so a friend is writing, possibly it was a large family. Each family member had their own assigned bed. You may write a PhD. We'll be happy. We'll be happy to get a better understanding. Okay, our explanation, your explanation, all are good enough. Again, this is not something that we can prove scientifically. Okay, there's only guesses. We're trying to explain what we have found. Many times, it's quite a challenging mission, I would say. Okay. Okay, this is it. Thank you very much again. We'll be happy to get your feedbacks about this visual
thank you,
tour.
Olga,
My pleasure.
Incredible tour.
My
It was really
pleasure.
amazing. It was brilliant. Just want to remind our viewers that with Israel Pack, you can experience the Holy Land and also make a difference by helping to build an amazing community of people who love Israel. Subscribe to Israel Pack today, and we will try our best to make sure that you like the products you will get in the box. Thank you for being with us today in Jerusalem. Hope to see you here someday. Shalom. Shalom and Litraot. In Hebrew it means see you. Litraot. Shalom.